as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Verdict as to count 3.
A 2-year-old girl went missing for 31 days. Her own mother never called the police, spent those weeks partying and getting tattoos. When investigators finally found the child's body, that's when the lies began. Orlando, Florida, summer of 2008. Caylee Marie Anthony was born on August 9, 2005. She lived with her mother, Casey, and her grandparents, George and Cindy, in a quiet suburban neighborhood. By all accounts, Caylee was a happy toddler, cheerful, easy, loved by everyone who met her. But inside that house, things were far from stable. Caylee Anthony was 22 years old. She didn't have a steady job, though she told people she worked at Universal Studios. She didn't. She lied constantly about work, about money, about where she was going and who she was with. Her relationship with her mother, Cindy, was tense. There were fights, accusations, threats about custody. On June 16, 2008, George Anthony said goodbye to Casey and Caylee as they left the house together. He would later testify that was the last time he saw his granddaughter alive. And for the next 31 days, no one outside the family saw Caylee either. But Casey didn't say a word. June 16th was a Monday. According to what investigators pieced together later, that was the day Caylee disappeared. But Casey didn't report it. She didn't tell her parents. She didn't tell her friends. Instead, Casey spent much of that time staying with her boyfriend at an apartment complex called Sutton Place. She went to parties. She was active on social media. She got a tattoo on her shoulder that read, Bella Vita, beautiful life. When her mother Cindy asked where Caylee was, Casey had answers ready. She's with the nanny. She's at the beach. She's with a friend from work. Cindy accepted the excuses for a while. But by mid-July, Cindy was getting suspicious. Casey kept dodging her requests to see Caylee. Phone calls went unanswered. Finally, on July 15th, Cindy tracked down Casey's car. It had been impounded from a tow yard. When George picked it up, he immediately noticed something was wrong. The smell. George told the tow yard manager he recognized the smell. It smelled like decomposition, like death. Cindy found Casey that same day at her boyfriend's apartment. She demanded to know where Caylee was. Casey stalled. She gave vague answers. She said Caylee was with a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, Zanny for short. Cindy didn't believe her anymore. That night, July 15th, Cindy called 911 3 times. On the third call, she said the words that would ignite a media firestorm. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. And then she said it. I have not seen my granddaughter for 31 days. The operator asked to speak to Casey. Casey's voice was steady. She told the operator that Caylee had been taken by the nanny 31 days ago. She said she'd been trying to find her on her own. She said she was scared the nanny would hurt Caylee if she involved the police. None of it made sense. By the next morning, investigators were all over it. Detective Yuri Melik was assigned as the lead investigator. He sat down with Caylee Anthony on July 16th, less than 24 hours after the 911 call. He expected a distraught mother. What he got was a young woman who seemed more annoyed than afraid. Casey repeated her story. Caylee had been kidnapped by her nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. She gave an address. Detectives went there. It was a vacant apartment. No one named Zenaida had ever lived there. Casey said she worked at Universal Studios. Detectives drove her there. She walked them down a hallway, confident, like she knew where she was going. Then she stopped, turned around, and admitted she didn't actually work there. She hadn't worked there in years. Detective Mellish pressed her for answers. Where was Caylee? Who was this nanny? Casey kept talking. She named co-workers who didn't exist. She described phone calls that never happened. She said she'd been conducting her own investigation, following leads, trying to protect her daughter. Melik recorded the whole interview. At one point, his frustration broke through. We know you're lying, he said. Casey didn't flinch. She was arrested that same day. Not for murder, not yet. For providing false information to law enforcement. For child neglect. For obstruction. But the bigger question loomed: where was Caylee? Volunteers poured into Orlando. Thousands of people searched swamps, fields, lakes, and woods. Texas EquuSearch brought boats, dogs, and horses. They combed through miles of dense Florida terrain. The heat was brutal. The searches turned up nothing. Meanwhile, forensic teams focused on Casey's car, a white Pontiac Sunfire. The trunk smelled like death. That much was clear. But could they prove it scientifically? They took carpet samples, air samples. They sent them to a lab at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee. Dr. Arpad Voss, a forensic anthropologist, analyzed the compounds. He found 51 different chemicals. Many were consistent with human decomposition. He also found traces of chloroform. Investigators went back to the Anthony home computer. They found a search. Someone had Googled chloroform on Casey's browser. Early reports said it had been searched 84 times. That number would later be proven wrong. It was actually one search, but at the time it seemed damning. The theory started to form. Casey had used chloroform to knock Caylee out. Then she suffocated her with duct tape. She kept the body in the trunk of her car, and then she dumped it. But where? For months there was no body, no proof, just suspicion and circumstantial evidence. And then in August, a utility worker named Roy Kronk was working near the Anthony home. He went into a wooded area to relieve himself. He saw something, a bag, and what looked like a skull. He called the police, multiple times. They searched the area. The ground was flooded. They didn't find anything. Kronk was dismissed. Months passed. On December 11, 2008, Roy Kronk went back to that same spot. This time, he didn't wait. He called 911 again. Deputies arrived. They searched carefully, and there it was. A small skull, inside a trash bag, inside a canvas laundry bag, covered with a blanket. Less than half a mile from the Anthony home. The remains were skeletal, scattered by animals and weather. Duct tape was found on or near the skull. Small bones from the hands and feet were missing. There were no soft tissues left to examine. On December 19th, the medical examiner confirmed it. The remains were Caylee Anthony. She had been dead for months, possibly since June. The autopsy was conducted by Dr. Jan Garvalia, the chief medical examiner for Orange and Osceola counties. She examined every bone, every fragment. She looked for trauma, for toxins, for any sign of how this child died. But the body was too decomposed. Dr. Garavalia could not determine a cause of death. She could not say whether Caylee had been suffocated, drowned, poisoned, or smothered. The only conclusion she could make was this: the manner of death was homicide. Not an accident, not natural, homicide. But how? That question would haunt the entire case. Prosecutors believed the duct tape was the key. Duct tape was found with the skull. The state argued that the tape had been placed over Caylee's nose and mouth while she was alive, that it was the murder weapon. But the defense had a different theory. They brought in Dr. Werner Spitz, a legendary forensic pathologist. He examined the evidence and said the autopsy was shoddy. He said the duct tape could have been applied after decomposition. He said it could have been used to keep the bag closed, not to kill the child. The state said Casey searched for chloroform. The defense said the search was an accident, one click, not 84. The state said Casey's behavior, partying, lying, getting a tattoo, showed she was relieved Caylee was gone. The defense said Casey was in shock, coping with trauma the only way she knew how. The state said the smell in the trunk was proof of a dead body. The defense said it could have been trash or the chloroform overlapping with gasoline. Every piece of evidence had two sides. And then there was the theory the defense introduced in opening statements, a theory no one saw coming. Jose Baez, Casey's lead attorney, stood in front of the jury and said this: Caylee didn't die from murder. She died from an accident. She drowned in the family pool on June 16, 2008. George Anthony found her. He panicked. He and Casey covered it up. The defense also claimed George had sexually abused Casey for years, that the lies, the bizarre behavior, the lack of emotion, it was all a trauma response. The prosecution called it a desperate deflection. George denied everything, but the seed of doubt was planted. Investigators went back through the evidence. They found something they'd missed. On the Anthony family computer, on June 16th, the day Caylee was last seen alive, someone had searched for foolproof suffocation on a Firefox browser. The search was done on a password-protected account that only Casey used. It was followed immediately by MySpace activity. But this evidence was never presented at trial. The police computer analyst had only checked Internet Explorer, not Firefox. By the time the search was discovered, the trial was over. The state's case rested on this: circumstantial evidence, forensic uncertainty, and the undeniable fact that Casey lied over and over and over. But was that enough to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt? The jury would have to decide. The trial began in May of 2011. It lasted 6 weeks, 59 prosecution witnesses, 47 defense witnesses, hundreds of pieces of evidence. The courtroom was packed. Cameras broadcast every moment live. Millions of people watched. On July 4th, the jury began deliberating. The next day, July 5th, they came back. The courtroom was silent. The verdict was read. Count 1, first-degree murder. Not guilty. Count 2, aggravated manslaughter of a child. Not guilty. Count 3, aggravated child abuse. Not guilty. Counts 4 through 7, providing false information to law enforcement. Guilty. Caylee Anthony showed no emotion. The courtroom erupted. Outside, crowds chanted, "Justice for Caylee." Some cried, some screamed. The anger was palpable. Jurors later explained their decision. They said the state never proved how Caylee died. Without a cause of death, they couldn't convict on murder. One juror said, "If you cannot prove what the crime was, you cannot determine what the punishment should be." Another juror later said he regretted the decision, that if he could do it over, he might vote for manslaughter. On July 7, Casey was sentenced for the lying convictions. 4 years, but she'd already served nearly 3 years in jail awaiting trial. With credit for time served, she was released on July 17, 2011. George and Cindy Anthony released a statement. They said they believed the jury made a fair decision based on the evidence, but they also said the defense's accusations against George were baseless. The family has never fully reconciled. Casey filed for bankruptcy in 2013. She gave a few interviews over the years. In one, she said she still doesn't know exactly how Caylee died. In another, she accused her father again. No one else has ever been charged in Caylee's death. The case is closed, but the question remains. Caylee Marie Anthony was 2 years old when she died. Her remains were found in a trash bag in the woods, half a mile from home. Her mother was acquitted. The cause of death is still listed as undetermined. And the world is still asking, what really happened to Caylee? If you have a theory about this case or thoughts on how the investigation was handled, leave a comment below. And if you want to see more deep dives into cases like this, hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.